Welcome back to the Movie Draft House. I'm your host, Mark, and I'm joined by co-host Jeff.
Hey there, Mark.
Hey.
Good evening for us here in the present recording era.
Yeah, right. It's present day here
Today
on
is
the
present
podcast.
day.
Yes, of course. However, before we get into if we're actually real people and doing real things, we have to plug some music.
We do.
And the music this month is brought to you by the solo artist Troy Doherty. Doherty. I can't pronounce.
Probably Doherty.
Yeah, Doherty. But he goes by Troy. And his song that he's allowed us use and feature for him on our podcast is the song Gemini. And he's doing big things. And you can catch his music wherever you get your music from. Hit the show notes. Get all the links to his social media accounts. Please give him a like, follow, subscribe. He's pretty good, and we appreciate him. Jeff.
Hey,
what's the theme this month?
this month's theme is one of the stupidest things we've ever come up with.
I don't know. It might be one of the best.
Yeah, well, we'll allow you, the listener, to decide what you think, but we're doing romantic comedies, but specifically Adam and Eve and Steve.
Or
So
Steve.
It's romantic comedies starring an Adam or an Eve or a Steve. And so to fit the theme this week, Mark has selected Seeking a Friend for the End of the World from 2012. It runs for an hour 41, and it stars Steve Carrell, Keira Knightley, and a bunch of other people like Adam Brody, Patton Oswalt, Rob Hubel, Rob Corddry, who are those. They tend to run in comedy circles, those latter two. It was directed by Lorene Scafaria. I'm probably saying that wrong. And it's rated R.
Rated R. Melanie Linsky is in this. I don't know. She's a pretty big TV actress in a bunch of stuff. But Miss Lorene, what's her face? Scafaria.
Lorene Scafaria.
Has also directed. She directed the movie Hustlers, which was pretty good back in 2019. Anyways, Jeff, did this hit the theme?
So there's two ways to answer that. The first question is, there's multiple ways. So was it romantic?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Was it a comedy? Well, here's where we get into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Where
this is a dramedy, right?
Two ways. Is it funny?
There are parts funny, yes.
Or is it trying to be funny, right? If one of those two is true, like if it's funny or trying to be funny, then I would give it the comedy nod. But there are a lot of movies that aren't comedies that have funny moments. And I feel like a lot of this cast, like Rob Hubel and Corddry, who are comedic actors, as is Steve Carell. And Patton Oswalt are comedians. And there's probably more that I'm missing out on. But I felt like their moments were kind of blips. Now, on the short answer, I'll say yes. It hits the theme. Okay. I feel like in a couple weeks when we get to or next week, actually, that's right. Next week, when we get to Marriage Story, then I might be able to put up more of a fight. But I think this is close enough. I think there are funny moments. I really feel like the concept could have lended itself to much funnier things than it went for. I think the movie definitely put the weight of the storytelling on the romance and not on the comedy. And I think a movie about dating when the world is going to end in 3 weeks is a good area to have a lot of comedic thought and execution done. And I feel like they didn't go for it enough in the comedy department.
Yeah, so we're getting Steve Carell here. This is 2012, and we're getting him at his. Maybe he's discovering that he's actually a good actor, right?
Well, I think had Little Miss Sunshine come out at this point?
Yeah, that was 2006.
Okay. And then he had another movie, which I think is maybe listed as a romantic comedy, but I think kind of fits in this same place that came out in '07 called Dan in Real Life, otherwise known as Steve Carell Sad About Pancakes, which stars your favorite actress, Juliette Binoche.
Ah, the old Binoche.
And it had Dane Cook. Ugh. And I remember liking that movie, but I would compare it to that. It's comparable in its comedy and its tone. Like, did you find this to be a funny movie?
I found it to have comedic moments, right? When he goes to the dinner party, and he takes Melanie Linsky's, or he is paired up with Melanie Linsky's character, and Connie Britton. Connie Britton's very funny in this film. And like everybody's just kind of very depressed, except Connie Britton and Melanie Linsky, and it's just there's moments in this film, like that dinner scene, that I found humorous. I felt like the movie was going for a comedic tone. I will agree with you that the movie does focus a lot on Steve Carell and Keira Knightley's budding romance. I was actually, so I had seen this movie once before, and
okay.
I don't remember if I saw it in the theaters. It's actually kind of a blur, and I didn't really remember how the movie, and I didn't really remember
it's
too much.
Kind of forgettable is kind of what you're saying.
I guess so when I saw it, but
yeah.
But watching it this time, I felt a lot of things for Steve Carell's character. He's very just resigned to himself in this film. And he's resigned to the fact that the world's going to end, and okay, he's good with that. And then he meets Keira Knightley.
Because I think what you're not mentioning is that his wife leaves him in the opening scene.
Yeah, sure.
Right. They hear on the radio, there's an asteroid coming, and the last ditch effort we had.
And she gets out and she runs. Right. That's comedic.
Failed. We're fucked in 21 days, and she hauls ass right away.
And she gets out and runs. Literally runs.
Really funny. But also for the character is taken very seriously, and it sets him on this path of depression where, like, the world is ending, and he reports to work the next day.
Right.
And I think that shows where the character's head is, because nobody else would, right? There's like 4 or 5 people in the office when he gets there. One of them's Rob Hubel, who is a bit part. Rob Hubel's a really funny guy, and he's not used in the movie at all.
Right. But there's reason. I mean, he has a couple lines, and he's like, "Hey, who wants this promotion?" And he's just like handing them out, right?
That's not Rob Hubel, but Rob Hubel's the guy next to him. But that guy, was a funny moment. Like, that's kind of where I'm thinking the movie could go, right? Where he's like, anybody want to be CFO? It's yours. You could just accept it and be CFO of this company. I found that to be funny.
Yeah. There's and moments that set up where the viewer is meant to sympathize with Steve Carell's character. I thought all of that is well done. Like, he's just kind of their guy, he's depressed, quite obviously, and he's just there. Like, he goes to this dinner party, and it's kind of like, hey, this is the end of the world party, and he goes into a bathroom and sits in the bathtub.
He's still depressed that his wife left. Like,
right.
He's not getting the chance to deal with the fact that his wife has left him.
I mean, Connie Britton comes on to him and like tries to make out with him, and he's like, "No, I'm good. Leave me in my
he's
leave
not
me in my
interested
bathtub."
in like frivolous sex, any of that. He's just kind of like, he's not willing to kind of go out in a blaze of glory like so much of the rest of the cast is willing to do.
Right.
Because he's still processing where he is. In a lot of ways, that makes him really endearing, because someone who is given away to their every whim tends to not be the most appealing person or character. Now, there is one scene that I'll say goes full comedy, where you're like, okay, this is kind of what I thought we'd see, is when they go to that, what ends up being like a TGI Fridays place called Friendly's.
Oh, yeah.
And TJ Miller's there, and Gillian Jacobs are there, and Amy Schumer there at that? No, she's in a different scene.
She's in a different scene, but yeah, she's in the movie.
But like they just have this weird scene where there's like, it's basically a rave happening at this restaurant, and I had questions about how the restaurant is still running, because I know they kind of said like, you know, hey, we're keeping it open, we're having fun, this is great fun. But restaurants don't work that way. Someone needs to be in charge, and someone's in the back still getting the food out. And there's still work that has to be done. You can't just play around and have a restaurant function. But besides the point, I felt that scene was kind of like what I thought the movie could go for, is that sort of extreme environment. But a lot of times it goes for scares too, like riots, and it's not a safe place. There's a point where Keira Knightley, when she meets Dodge, Steve Carell's character, is like, don't rape me, right? It's a reminder that there are no consequences in this world. Essentially, it's the purge, but wide open. So,
hey, don't rape her wide open. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, one thing, if you're watching on video, Mark can't see my face because we record on separate devices. He's just, but he heard my face through the silence. And when you see the video, you'll see my face change, because I'm like, what the hell is this dude talking about?
Anyways, yeah, when Dodge meets Keira Knightley, and they decide that they're going to try to leave town, and Adam Brody's character, I thought he was probably the funniest character in the whole film.
Yeah. So here's the flip side of this. I think there are a handful of funny moments, but they are chuckles at best, right? And that's kind of why I hesitate to call it a comedy, because of the lack of quality in the comedy. Like, there are a handful of funny moments, but there's nothing that is gut busting, nothing that's even really that particularly creative from a humor standpoint. And Adam Brody being the desperate boyfriend, it works, but again, it's not breaking any ground. And that's kind of my hesitation with talking about whether this fits the theme, is that if it was bad comedy, I would say, well, it is a comedy. It's just not good comedy. And a lot of it is just kind of not working. But in this, it doesn't even feel like they're going for jokes. Everything kind of has a serious tone to it.
Right. And I think that's the movie, right? It's, this is what I would classify as the dramedy. It does have its comedic moments. However, it's built around this drama that's happening in the world of the film, the end of the world being this film, and Steve Carell and Keira Knightley's friendships turned to romance.
So let's talk about that. Did you buy it?
Yeah, I did, and I don't know if I did until he puts her in the airplane, right? And then when he puts her in the airplane, I'm like, bro, what the fuck? But I was on board with that. Like I was kind of shocked when it happened. I was like, wait a minute. he has this last night with his dad and this girl that he loves.
Martin Sheen is his dad, and again, there's a lot of weird, like small roles taken up by, I guess maybe nowadays who are big names. So Martin Sheen is a big name even back then.
But he has this last night, and it happens off screen, or not really off screen, but there's no dialogue to it. But he strikes. He tells his dad, I got a favor to ask you, and we find out that the favor was, hey, can you fly this girl to see her parents before the end of the world? And his dad does it because
he guilt trips him into it.
Right.
He was a piss poor father.
Right. And when Steve Carell carries Keira Knightley into the plane, which I thought was kind of like this, she's going to wake up at some point.
So at least I will say this, because I felt the same way. But they do establish in the movie that she's
a heavy
very
sleeper.
hard to wake up.
Yeah.
That she'll smoke weed when she goes to bed, and is essentially like hardcore passed out.
Right. But like when he puts her in, and like what he gives her something, I forget what he gives her.
His harmonica.
That's what I just like that hit me the right way. And I don't know if it was because of everything that was built up to it. They had spent, countless, however much time in film, and how much time is supposed to be passing in the film. But I felt something when he put her in there, and he gives his dad the head nod, and he closes the door. He whispers in her ear that she's the love of his life, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I felt that. I felt Steve Carell, and it's more testament to Carell's acting, I think, than anything else. But we had spent so much time with these two characters, and we see that she's finally starting to fall in love with him. And he makes the conscious decision to put her in an airplane and potentially never see her again. I thought it was a really good moment. And I was angry at it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how I know it was a good moment, because me as a viewer, I was angry. I was like, wait a minute, fuck that guy. No, man. The world's about to end, bro. Spin it on you.
See
right.
So he puts her first.
Right. And that's why I was angry, is because I wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to spend the last moments of his life doing the thing that he wanted to do. Instead, he puts this girl that he loves on a plane to see her parents.
Then he goes and listens to records.
And he goes to her apartment and listens to her records.
Creepy stalker guy.
That moment, that whole sequence hit me. The whole, when he shows up at Martin Sheen's house, and that whole thing where they kind of have the montage of bonding, I was just like, man, holy shit, where'd this film come from? Because now it's a good movie.
And you don't like montages. You said it on this pod.
Best montage I've ever seen is in RRR.
Oh. What about Team America?
Anyway, what about you? I mean, what did you think of that sequence and the decisions that his character Dodge made in that moment?
Yeah, it all worked. I think the biggest problem for the romance side of things is the age gap. They acknowledge it in the film. It's like almost 10 years, and I feel like he could be her dad almost, like there's that sort of thing, but he's not quite that much older than her. But what keeps me from actually being pulled out of the movie from that is that this is the end of the world, right? So being concerned about what people will think if you're dating someone who is younger than you, not problematically younger than you, like she's very much an adult and mature, and he's not taking advantage of her. He's quite the opposite. He tends to give her plenty of space. But I think that because it is a slower burn, and they are sort of at odds a little bit, but she kind of pulls him along a lot of the time. And I think like when, because the subplot is that he's trying to help her get back to England to see her family before the end of the world. And she decides that because they're neighbors and she lost a letter that should have gone to his place, and in there was a letter from a lost love that he has to go find. And she's like, okay, I'm going to help you find her, because the letter said she broke up with her husband and she was interested in Steve Carrell. So once they find her, you get this moment where Kira's trying to be happy for him, but she's actually upset because she's falling for him. And that is a trope that I've seen many times, but it's one that usually works. And Keira Knightley's a very good actor. And so I think she helps push that forward a little more.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, I think it largely works. If you were to tell me before I saw the film, we're going to watch a romantic comedy where Keira Knightley and Steve Carell are love interests, I'd be like, really? I don't know, because like in that other movie, Dan in Real Life, he's opposite Juliette Binoche, who's a much more closer in his age, and it just works. There's a little less for me to get past, because we live in the age of Leo DiCaprio dating high schoolers, and it immediately becomes problematic to me. And so even though I think, their age difference isn't honestly a problem, it does take me a little while to accept it as not being a problem.
Yeah, but when he puts her in the plane, you've already accepted that, hey, these two are in love.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the point of the movie.
They have a little coitus in a truck, and she's very much the instigator, if that's the word, and so that, again, he's not in any way taking control of her, trying to manipulate her or anything like that. So it's just when you get the older guy with the younger woman, there's a lot of questions that come along with
I
that.
had 0 questions.
Of course you didn't.
I had 0 questions. I don't know why everything's got to be a question. The two people are in love.
You asked me how I felt about it, and I told you.
I'm just saying it. It's like I don't necessarily understand why immediately there's got to be questions about, is he taking advantage of her? It's just
because of the age difference.
I mean, my grandmother and grandfather were 10 years apart.
Okay.
I never once thought that my grandfather took advantage of my grandmother.
All right. That's fair. You come from a different background. I'm not trying to argue. I'm just telling you my thoughts on the film.
I'm just saying, like, now,
I
never once.
Get personal and let's get into it, because I've offended you more than once on this podcast. We can do that.
Yeah, it's not the first time. I'm used to it. It's fine. I got it. I'm just saying, I never had that, like, oh my God, this is dad and daughter, like high school teenager. Like, I never got that from this.
No, and I wouldn't go that far, but I did feel like, I mean, it is enough of a gap to, they even address it. At one point they tell each other their ages. I don't remember what the difference was, but it just, again, I mean, they're different generations. I mean, 10 years is a long time generationally. And, like, it was something that was part of the movie that I took a little time to adjust to.
Sure. That's fine.
I know it's fine, Mark.
It's fine. It's fine. You're entitled to your weird phobias.
Excuse me, I watched a 3-hour movie today.
That's on you.
Yeah.
So I mean, what did you think of the ending then? Yeah. So, all right, I asked you, what did you think of the ending?
So, okay, again, we'll establish it's the end of the world. There's a comet coming, and there's a moment in the film where Keira Knightley basically is moving forward through her life like the world isn't ending, because she says, I'm an optimist. We're going to survive. I'm an optimist. So when you get to the final scene, right, she's come back to her apartment. He's there, and they both profess their love for one another, and then they're laying in bed. essentially waiting on the world to end, and he's running his fingers through her hair, and there's like loud noises outside, and she's scared. And how I felt about I wanted them to live, to be honest. I was
you were invested in their lives. Yes, good movie. Good movie. All right, keep going.
Okay. I did want them to live, but I didn't mind them dying. But the dying, again, because the question that keeps coming up is, we're doing romantic comedies. I'm like, what romantic comedy ends with them dying, And I just...
Romeo and Juliet.
That's not a romantic comedy.
Nomeo and Juliet.
I've never seen that, thankfully. But yeah, I just I liked the ending, but it again didn't feel like a romantic comedy ending.
No, and I think ultimately this is not a rom-com. And I'm okay saying that, is because I do feel strongly about the film. But it's not a rom-com. It's a drama. There's comedic moments, but it's centered on, the drama of Steve Carell and Keira Knightley's relationship.
So,
yeah.
I want to test the waters a little.
All right, let's go. Dip your toes in.
Here in a rom-com month, you're saying this is not a rom-com, and I'm not going to argue with you. I appreciate your honesty.
Sure.
In Western month, you selected a movie that I think is not a Western. Are you willing to admit that? No? Okay. I was just checking. I was seeing how much of a new mark we had in 2024.
No, man. Were there cowboy hats in that movie?
They got cowboy hats, and they've got boots, and they drive trucks instead of horses.
They're robbing banks. They're robbing banks with cowboy hats. Get the fuck out of here. That is a fucking Western movie. I don't give a fuck what you say. That's a Western through and through.
That sucks my balls. Okay, now.
Anyways.
We have to revisit that on occasion.
Anyways, I'm okay with where I'm at with this film, is because by the end of it, all the way, up until about the third act, where they get to Martin Sheen's house, I'm like, this road trip movie, I don't know. I don't know. It hasn't been funny enough for me to really give it, kind of an elevated status in rom-com. Air quoted that, but as soon as they get there and he puts her on that plane, I was in. Like, I was like, oh, fuck, let's go. And then when she shows up and they lay in the bed looking at each other in the last moments of their life, and she says she's scared, and he's like, I know, or whatever he says, and I love you. Thank you for, being the best thing in my life. And it's just, man, like, I don't know. It just really hit me. Like there is something eerily romantic about dying in a bed with the person that you have felt the most about at the highest of your love bank, right?
It's absolutely tragically romantic,
right? And I just it resonated with me. And the film ends. The film ends there. Like, we don't see them die. We just see the bright light.
They give you a long black screen before the credits hit. So like it goes white because the asteroid is bombing them or whatever, and then it goes black, and I'm just waiting to see them the next day, and it doesn't happen, right? And which I'm fine with. But I felt like they knew what they were doing when they left that long pause. Like,
so like there's that moment in this film. To me, it was just like it was a happy ending, but it was a sad ending. It was this tragic ending, like you said. It just culminated a lot of different emotions in me, and I'm like, damn it! But good for them. man, they died in each other's arms.
Damn it. But good for them.
But like, right, that's
Put
my
that on the
conflict.
poster.
That's my conflicted emotions about what I'm watching, and then afterwards, it stuck with me. Like the last 15, 20 minutes of that film stuck with me, and I don't know how to describe other than at that moment I knew I had watched a good film. And it wasn't until it like elicited that emotion out of me that I realized this film is a good film. It's because a lot of what had happened prior to that was just like, okay, we're trying to, a lot of tropes, right? A lot of romantic tropes. But then, and then it kind of flips and I'm just like all on board. I'm so invested in their relationship. I'm so invested in what happens now that she showed back up. I was so angry at him for putting her in the plane. I was sad for him because he's listened to her fucking records in her apartment. I'm feeling all these emotions, and then like she shows back up and she's like, "What the fuck?" And I'm like, "What the fuck?" And I don't know, man. I wasn't expecting this level of emotion out of this movie when I watched it, and I really enjoyed this film.
I can tell. But
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry you didn't.
I didn't say I didn't.
No, I know, but you were expecting a romantic comedy, and you didn't get it.
Setting that aside, if you pitch this to me as like an indie romance film, I'd probably be like, yeah, that was good. But that's about as far as I go, right? Like, it isn't something that like I'm going to go out and, put, hey, you guys got to watch this, but it was entertaining from start to finish. I liked the way it opened with his wife running away and just kind of setting this tone. I gotta say, because I feel like we're wrapping up, but I gotta tell you about my biggest problem.
Okay.
With this movie, when they get pulled over, and they don't just drive away. So it's the end of the world. They get pulled over for going too slow, and then not having their license and registration on them or whatever. The cop puts them in jail. And I'm like, it's the end of the world. I will not spend my last however long in jail.
Are you killing somebody to stay out of jail?
No, I'm not going to kill the cop, but I would leave. At some point, that cop would so he they get arrested, and then the other cop comes in. He's like, "Damn it! Like, why are you arresting these people? It's the end of the world." Like, he just lets them go because he's like, he's just an idiot. He's overzealous, and I kind of threw my hands up, like, why wouldn't you have just run?
Yeah. This in the film, the scene where they get picked up by the guy in the truck, and like you get real like serial killer vibes from him. And what is it? Keira Knightley that leaves the truck? I think it was. And then he's like, "Hey man, how are we gonna do this?" And Steve Carell's like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah. How you gonna do it? You just gonna like, you gonna shoot me?
Yeah.
You gonna?" and like Steve Carell's like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And then we find, and then the guy gets killed by another guy, like outside, and he finds out that he had hired an assassin to kill him,
which was crazy, right?
Right. It's a random funny moment, and I feel like that's what this movie is. It's kind of just a collection of random funny moments wrapped around this really really good romance. And like Keira Knightley and Steve Carell's chemistry doesn't always work for me, but the back half of the movie is where it's sold, and that's where I got sold on it. And so I don't know. Do you recommend this?
No, I think it just doesn't quite. It doesn't quite do enough in any one particular feel. Like it's not my favorite romance, or not that it has to be my favorite, but it doesn't do a lot on the romance side to really make me want to recommend it. It's not particularly funny. It's an enjoyable Saturday night film to watch with your honey, and that's about as far as I go. But I don't think I'd recommend it.
Yeah, if it hadn't ended the way it would, if it hadn't ended the way it did, I probably wouldn't have recommended it either. But the fact that it hit me like it did at the end, and then stuck with me, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, damn, that's a fucking good movie. I'm gonna recommend it, just simply because it's one of those weird films that I feel like you probably should see, and at least once, and decide for yourself if it hits the notes that it claims that it does. I don't know. I can't really.
You loved it, and that's cool, man. That's great.
But I didn't love the entire movie, right?
Okay.
I love the last act of this movie, and that's what really sold me on it. Is that in the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I was all about it, and I'm trying to think of other movies where I've kind of done that, where a movie's hit me in the last half or a certain section and got me completely on board with it. But I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for that type of emotion in this film, in this theme, in this month. You know what I'm saying? It was kind of unexpected. So
it didn't hit me as hard as The Lonely Guy, but
speaking of, yeah. What are we watching next week?
Oh, God. So I promise you this is not a comedy, and I will, while I took it easy on you this week, because honestly, I can't really blame you for thinking that this was going to be a comedy, but I don't understand what planet you came from that you thought Marriage Story from 2019 is a comedy of any regard.
I can't wait.
And unless it proves me wrong, if you refuse to admit that it's not a comedy, oh my God.
So, Marriage Story is directed and written by Noah Baumbach, who also wrote and produced Barbie.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
I mean, we got a very funny guy directing this movie.
How do you know he's funny? Because let me tell you what else he wrote. The Life Aquatic with Steve Suiso. That movie sucks. Mr. Fantastic Fox. He tends to hang with what's his name?
Oh, Wes Anderson?
Yeah.
Is he a Wes Anderson guy?
Yeah, because he did.
Fuck Wes Anderson.
Mr. Fox was Wes Anderson. Life Aquatic was Wes Anderson. So I'm going to be honest. Of the films you've picked this year, this is the lowest expectations I've had going in. I really don't want to watch this.
Oh, he wrote the Meyerowitz stories, which I think has Ben Stiller in it. Yeah, it does. Okay.
But yeah. So anyway, you can watch that, tune in next week, and we'll see if this is a comedy. You've seen it, right?
Yes, I did. I don't know how I don't know how much attention I was paying to it.
I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna open the floor.
Okay.
And say, Mark, if you want to redraft, feel free.
No, I don't.
Okay. I
don't.
gave you an out.
This is if nothing else.
I'm serving you hot plates. Next week.
No, all right, that's fine. You take me to task on the theme, but it's got a 7.9 on IMDb.
Oh, big fucking
It's probably
deal.
got like 98 on Rotten
94 on
Tomatoes.
Metacritic. No one gives a shit. That doesn't tell you if it's a comedy or not.
Right, but like
the whole premise of this podcast is hitting the theme, and you just seem to not care.
I don't care.
Disregard it.
I don't care.
When it's October, you draft fucking dramas, and then when it's Christmas, you draft horror movies. It boggles the mind. And I mean, I've made misses. I mean, there was no planet Earth where the shit was on Earth, but I fucked up, right? It was an accident. Like I think there are other movies you picked where you're like, yeah, I don't think I hit the theme, and that's great. But then there are times where I'm like, dude, what the hell? This is what that feels like right now. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
Do you want me to pick a different movie?
No.
Because I will. I got one right off the top of my head.
I always worry that it'll be worse.
I don't think it can, but I'll give you the option.
Okay.
If you want me to pick
if it's got Van Damme in it, it's a guaranteed switch.
It doesn't have Van Damme in it. But
fuck it, we're watching Marriage Story then. But go ahead, tell me.
I was gonna pick damn, I just had the name of the movie.
It's got a Steve in it.
Oh wait, does it? Hold on. Un momento. We could have used this movie with directed by and starring the same actor. But I was gonna pick Don John.
Nope.
From 2013.
We're good.
Directed by and starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Scarlett Johansson.
I don't think.
But it has your mortal enemy in it.
Who's that?
Julianne Moore.
I wouldn't call her my mortal enemy. I don't like her acting. She is probably a wonderful and pleasant person. Unlike others whose names will not be mentioned. We're going to watch Marriage Story next week. Oh.
Anyways, we want to give another shout out to the music this month. We give a shout out to Troy for allowing us to use his music here this month with the song Gemini. Make sure you hit the show notes, get the links to all his social media accounts. He's doing big things. Give him a like, follow, and a subscribe. And speaking of liking and following and subscribing, be sure to hit the subscribe button when it pops up if you're watching on YouTube. And if you want to follow the podcast on all your favorite social media platforms, we're at Movie Draft House because we're on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the things, all the places. We're doing it all. And make sure you're following the podcast on all your favorite podcast streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere.
Google Podcast is dying, but that's okay.
Is it dying? Oh god.
Yeah, it's getting replaced by YouTube Music.
Oh, R.I.P. Google Podcasts.
Not a bad app.
Anyways, if you want to follow Jeff on Twitter and tell him, hey, man, it's probably not a good idea you watch 3-hour movies right before recording a podcast, you can find him at Podcast by Jeff.
Yeah, I don't want to watch 3-hour movies, but I do podcasts where sometimes that happens. Check out Chronologically. Right now, it's M. Night Shyamalan.
Wait, what 3-hour movie did you watch?
Salem's Lot. It's originally a mini-series and then cut into a 3-hour movie. I'm not going to spoil how I feel about it here. You got to check Jump Over the Wall. But if you want to get in touch with Mark and say, Mark, I thought I laughed my ass off through Marriage Story. If you want to contact Mark, say, Mark, I laughed my ass off. That was the funniest shit I've ever seen in my entire life. You can do so on Twitter at I Heard You Liked.
Drop some comments in the YouTube.
And then check out the all the Oscar coverage Mark is doing over on YouTube. You might have saw one drop in the feed a couple weeks ago. You know, he's on top of this shit.
Yeah. Our first video on Spotify was one of the Oscar episodes. So that's new and exciting. And we appreciate all of you. Jeff, you have any last words of wisdom?
Nope. See you next week.